Let's talk a bit about whether this is a racist book. Because, even within its pages, it says things like the people being cursed with black skin or dark skin. And as a Native American and Latter-day Saint myself, I've had special interest in this, especially because this book is supposedly about me, about whether I'm one of these groups of people, the Lamanites within it. It could be about my skin. But I think there's a lot to unpack here because a lot of this is based on kind of the assumptions we bring to this text, the approaches we bring to it, kind of the lenses we see it through. And I think a lot of that needs to be evaluated here, not just for non-members, but for members as well, probably especially members, because there's a lot of stuff we've brought onto this text. And so I want to talk about some of these approaches really briefly, and then go over three different approaches or three different kind of more theories and explanations or answers to the skin of blackness in the Book of Mormon, and then dive even deeper into some of these approaches. But first, the question of whether the Book of Mormon is racist, I think we need to first look at the lens we bring on it. Even Latter-day Saints. So the church started in the 19th century, and during that time era, there was a lot of deep cultural racism. And it was a part of everyone in every culture and people in the Americas, in the United States. And to think that Latter-day Saints might have been immune to this, I think is pretty foolish, unrealistic. They were just as susceptible to this as everyone else. And a lot of that has lasted over time from then, 19th century, to today, and affected how we read and view the Book of Mormon. And I think if we shed some of that, I think that'll only increase our faith in the Book of Mormon and see how solid the Book of Mormon is. But we need to grapple with a lot of that. And even non-members, on the flip side, non-members might come to this book automatically assuming it's a made-up 19th century book by Joseph Smith. But I think a lot of the solution here is to just look at the text itself. What does it say? And it says that it's an ancient text. And I know that's hard to accept, especially for non-members. But I promise if you do at least kind of entertain the idea that it's an ancient text, a lot of things will just start popping out and making sense and bringing the book to life. And at the very least, you'll understand the Latter-day Saint perspective. And so we kind of need to go over some of these lenses, but I think the biggest thing is just kind of looking at it as an ancient text and seeing if there's any ancient explanations for this skin of blackness that's mentioned in it, instead of just assuming with our modern lens that it's racist. And so I hope these three possible explanations will help. The third one is probably my most favorite. I'll spend a lot more time on that. But let's go into each of these. So, if the Book of Mormon is racist, is there another explanation to it here? One possible solution is that perhaps the Book of Mormon is not talking about skin color, but talking about symbolism. It's being symbolic. And one of the best evidences for this is that Joseph Smith himself, after he published the Book of Mormon, he went through it and he made some corrections to the text, updated some of it, which as Latter-day Saints, we think that's fine. And he changed some wording in it from these people being white and delightsome to pure and delightsome. He changed white to pure, kind of showing that perhaps he thought this was more symbolic about being pure than about being white or the skin color white. So there's an evidence there. It's more modern, but ancient evidences. We see this all over the ancient Middle East, where even the Quran, I think, talks about the day of judgment and how people's faces will blacken or whiten. It's using this symbolic language, which is interesting because pretty much most Middle Eastern people during that time were dark skinned. The Bible also mentions this. One second, let me get a drink here. The Bible, I think it's in the Book of Lamentations or something, talks about people being white as snow or black as coal. Symbolic language there as well. And in the Middle East, just in other ancient texts, I think there's some like treaties with kings, and if you break these treaties, they actually are going to curse you with blackness and being like separated from the community and also cursed to death. Kind of like our saying, good as dead, someone's as good as dead. You're kind of cursing this people to die. And there's some similar language like that in the Book of Mormon, where when it talks about people being cursed with the skin of blackness, it's a cursing that they're being separated from God and they're going through spiritual death or spiritual darkness. So you see some similarities there. Within the Book of Mormon itself, it has this symbolic language too. For example, in one prophet's vision, his name's Lehi, and the vision's called the Tree of Life. To Latter-day Saints, that's what we call it. He talks about this vision and how he contrasts, he compares different elements of this vision really clearly, really vividly. He talks about seeing a dark and dreary world, a dark waste, a dark wilderness, mists of darkness, all this dark terminology, these dark words, with the white robes of the angel, the white fruit, the white tree. I think at one point it talks about the Virgin Mary as being white and pure, which is interesting because the Virgin Mary would have been Hebrew, and so she would have had darker skin and darker hair and maybe even darker eyes or something like that. So really clear, like black and white, dark and white symbology, which we also see in the Book of Mormon. So these are all just kind of ancient examples of how we can look at these verses about dark skin or black skin, and how this could all be more symbolic than we realize, and how there's good evidence for it. So symbology is one answer. The second answer is pretty intriguing. It's what if these references in the Book of Mormon about black skin are about clothing? So the Book of Mormon talks a lot about a group wearing a skin girded about their loins, or a loincloth, this clothing that they would wear. But it says a skin girded about their loins. And some of these verses about the skin girded about their loins are right next to people's skins being dark. So kind of suggesting, as one possible answer, is that perhaps it's their skins, their clothing, that are being dyed dark or something like that. And there's examples of that in ancient history. Clothing could be symbolic. Even in the Book of Mormon, there's references to a group of people who, it says that they specifically dyed their loincloths, their skins, in blood to dye them red and to terrify their enemies. So it's an example of people using their clothing to symbolically make a statement or something, which is pretty interesting. It gets even more interesting though, because the researcher who kind of proposed this idea, Ethan Sprout, who I didn't realize this until later, but I took classes from him at UVU. He was my ethics teacher, fun guy. And he found this connection, but then he also found something else. He found that a lot of these verses about dark skin, black skin, are right next to verses about the temple references. Nephi is building his temple, and then it talks about these dark skins or black skins. And he pointed out how in ancient Israelite temple traditions that they kind of had this focus within them of Adam and Eve and Adam and Eve's coat of skins, and how they would compare the dark skins of Adam and Eve in their fallen state to the garments of light in their glorified state. And so it could be that these Book of Mormon authors had these ideas or concepts in mind as they were writing out this stuff in the text about dark skins. And I found a neat example. It might be in Ethan's essay for all we know. I don't know. But I was reading a verse about Christ and how he cleanses us. And it was using clothing symbology, pretty much saying how he washes our garments clean through his blood and they become white. And it says it twice in here that their garments are clean through Christ, which is an interesting concept, because how can blood make someone's clothing white? But it's being done through Jesus. And so there you have a bit of clothing symbology mixed with symbology as well. So these two possible explanations in one, which I think is pretty neat. So you see it scattered throughout the Book of Mormon. So that's the second possible solution to this question. But this third one is my most favorite, because I think it's grounded in a lot of ancient history that I love to learn about. So let me get another water here. But the third possible answer to this question is perhaps the skin of darkness mentioned in the Book of Mormon is about body paint. Like perhaps these people literally painted their bodies completely black. And again, I think that's awesome because it's actually grounded in ancient history. For example, when Christopher Columbus first came into the Americas, he kept a journal and he recorded about some of the natives he saw, how they painted themselves completely black, their whole entire bodies, he says. And that was something that stuck out to him enough that he wrote it down. And so perhaps that's something that stuck out to the Book of Mormon authors enough that they wrote it down, that they noticed. Perhaps the Book of Mormon authors, perhaps there's a group that split away from the Book of Mormon, from the main Book of Mormon group, and then joined some native group and adopted these practices for themselves. And that surprised the original Book of Mormon authors. I find that intriguing because there's lots of evidence for ancient Native Americans painting their bodies, especially in Mesoamerica, which is one reason why I lean to the Mesoamerican setting for the Book of Mormon, because this is just one of many evidences that it could have happened there. And they all just bring the Book of Mormon to life like this. So that's for me. We don't necessarily know exactly where it happened, but I think it points there. But there's a lot of ancient Mayan murals of people who are white and people who are black. And at first, people might have thought that these were different races, but archaeologists eventually realized that these were actually people painting themselves completely white or black. If you've seen the movie Apocalypto, not that I have, I've seen clips of it, and I went down a rabbit hole while scrolling and just saw a ton of clips of it. By the way, the consultant, the scholarly consultant of that movie is Dr. Richard Hansen. He's a Latter-day Saint as well. And he consulted in this to make it more accurate. And you'll see people on it fully painted blue, fully painted white, because that was the tradition back then. And what's interesting is a lot of times these people who painted themselves these colors it was kind of based on the elite group or the hunter group or the warrior group. And what's neat is in the Book of Mormon, when it mentions the skin of blackness, that it's in the context of warfare. This group had broken off from this other group. Suddenly they're fighting, and suddenly these people are black-skinned, which I think is kind of interesting. It's not just ancient Mesoamerica. It's also here in northern America. I love learning about Utah history. And there's this ancient culture here called the Barrier Canyon peoples. They have these ghost-like, creepy pictographs scattered throughout Utah, and they're red. And there's evidence that these peoples painted their whole bodies red like this as well, with this red ochre paint that was so strong that it lasted thousands of years on these pictographs. There's even some thought that the term redskins, which is offensive now, derogatory, but there's some evidence that there was actually a Native American group that painted their skins red to identify themselves as redskins, as opposed to the white people and the black people. Kind of interesting there. And I don't know why they would paint themselves red. I mean, for hunting and elites and stuff, but it could be that like it was a way to protect yourself from bugs and things like that as well. So a really interesting concept there that I think brings the Book of Mormon to life. And kind of along the idea of body paint, there's also body tattoos. I kind of combine this into one. The Bible talks about tattoos in a way that describes them as skin markings. And the Book of Mormon a lot of times calls this change a mark. It actually kind of it makes this difference between mark and curse. There's a curse and a mark. The curse is being separated from God. The mark is something physical. And so it's helpful to try to see those differently. And the mark looks like something that physically happened. What's interesting is in the Book of Mormon, it talks about a group, I think it's the Amlicites, who it says mark themselves with red on their forehead, kind of like a tattoo. And when it says they mark themselves, it basically is saying that they ended up cursing themselves and fulfilling God's prophecy about people marking and cursing themselves. That's an evidence that this could be something more physical happening. That's why I love this idea. And there's examples of this. I think there's evidence in a Mesoamerican site, Chichen Itza or something, where they actually have evidence of an ancient group that put red on their foreheads, kind of like here in the Book of Mormon. So imagine being the original Book of Mormon group and someone breaks off from you and they join another Native American group and adopt their customs onto themselves, and they paint themselves all black. And then you see them for the first time and you're surprised that they would do this. And you're probably like a Hebrew or something. And you interpret it in a way that says they've marked themselves, they've cursed themselves, they've separated themselves from us, they've separated themselves from God, they've broke the covenant between God, and they've cursed themselves. And now they're painting themselves and showing their loyalty to this other group. That brings the Book of Mormon to life for me. This whole idea of body paint. Now, that's probably my favorite idea. So the Book of Mormon, the skin of blackness in the Book of Mormon could be about body paint. But it could be a mix of all three. And that probably makes more sense. I do lean towards the body paint, but it could be a mix of all three. In some cases, it might be more symbolic or not. But let's go into like approaches and lens back into that, because how do we come up with answers like this that for me makes sense? I hope it makes sense to you guys. And if you're not a member, I hope it at least helps you understand our perspective. There's so much more we could do about this. But how do we come up with answers like this? There's several approaches, and I want to suggest like a couple. One is to just look at the text itself. And I talked about earlier about separating our 19th century lens from it, past cultural baggage from it, and just look at the text itself. But not only look at the text itself, but also understand that some of this wasn't even included in the original text. Like the introduction, that was never part of the original text. And there were changes made to this about Native Americans. And people threw a fuss about it because it used to say the Lamanites were the principal ancestors of Native Americans, and they changed it to be among the ancestors of the Native Americans. And that's fine because we got updated information, and so we updated this. This was added in 1980 or sometime around that. It was never part of the original text. These images here, never part of the original text, of course, but some people have complained that this is kind of a colonization image, the white people coming to the Americas and taking it over. So that was never part of the original text. Maybe those should be taken out. Chapter headings were never part of the original text. Neither were verses. And we put them that way so we could better find information, but they were never originally there. And I think they might even separate messages, separate ideas, break up the text, ruin the storyline, and kind of help us not get into it as an ancient text. And so I recommend people read it like how it was originally printed, without any verses, kind of like a story. It's much more fun. And so Mark Twain once made fun of the Book of Mormon for saying if you took out the word "and it came to pass," that it would lose all of its meaning and stuff, because "and it came to pass" is repeated so many times in the Book of Mormon. But "and it came to pass" becomes an ancient term to help separate ideas and new sentences. And so it comes to life that way. You don't have to read a replica like this. There's good books on Amazon, one by Grant Hardy, where he kind of reformats it into the story structure. He even adds some headers, but they're really simple, but it helps separate the ideas in them. I think it really helps. So the first approach is to just focus on it as just to focus on the text. And when we do that and separate all this other stuff, it actually comes more alive. You can actually see how solid of a foundation it is. The gospel becomes much more clear and it builds faith. The second approach I would suggest is to use the lens of recent and modern archaeology and science. Early Latter-day Saints, they didn't have that. They interpreted the world through the Bible. Archaeology wasn't even a thing really back then. So we can kind of give them not a pass, but we could kind of understand why they made these mistakes. But we shouldn't. And there's lots of research and stuff now happening. And we should just, I think, assume certain facts, like that there were people in the Americas way before the Book of Mormon peoples were here. And that if there were people here, they had their own customs and traditions, and they would have likely affected the Book of Mormon peoples. And there's evidences of that. And one of the next videos I want to make is evidences of other people in the Book of Mormon. That'll be really fun. I think that's one of the most important things to understand about the Book of Mormon. That helps answer questions. But also other facts, like all Native Americans were dark-skinned, right? There really isn't a black and white person. We're all different shades of brown. right? Even Hebrew people, the people who came into the Americas, were darker skinned and darker haired. So understanding that kind of helps answer a lot of these questions. Kind of helps you see how, yeah, this likely is symbolic or about something else. That's the second approach. I think along with that second approach, subtopic under that, this all just goes to show how important Book of Mormon academic research is, how important it is to read it and share it, how important certain organizations are out there that are doing this, how important it is for a lot of these organizations to step up in doing more, because there's been a lot of people and organizations that have brought the Book of Mormon to life by using archaeology, anthropology, language studies, stylometry, and other stuff that really helps us understand the Book of Mormon. For example, a lot of the thoughts I've had in this book are based on an essay by Scripture Central, which has some awesome researchers there who wrote this. And they have footnotes to all of this information that you could go check out. I'll link the essay in the description. But it's important for us to read these things for two reasons. The first is, if you're not a member, to at least understand where we're coming from and engage with these answers, because I do see some people criticizing the Book of Mormon without even acknowledging some of this stuff. The second reason is for members, because it'll help prepare you if people ask you questions about this stuff, and to share it around so that the world has a better idea of some of our positions here. So, Book of Mormon research, amazing. I wish I had time to read a lot more. I did hear that there's some new research coming out about this topic and how early Book of Mormon prophets may have understood the curse and the mark differently than later Book of Mormon prophets, because there's like 1,000 years between Nephi and Mormon. And so Mormon may have been, interpreting it differently than Nephi. And Nephi had just come from the New World, so his perspective of things is different than someone who's lived in the New World for over 1,000 years. So that's some new research coming out. I'll try to share that with you guys. I want to share that with you guys. I will share that with you guys, because that's what this channel is about. Sharing these things, this important stuff about Native American issues and the Book of Mormon. I do other stuff like politics and some theology and stuff, but I'm really interested in this because I'm a Native American and I've learned this stuff and it all makes sense, and I want to share it with you guys. I want to do other videos like about Christopher Columbus, understanding that, colonialism in the Book of Mormon, what it means to be a Lamanite, lots of different things. I'm doing this solo by myself. I'm not connected to anyone doing this. So it's going to take me some time to put this all together. But if you subscribe and like and share, that's only going to help me do this faster and get this important information out there. So thanks a lot. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.